Good morning, everyone, and welcome to AustCham Thailand's webinar, today in partnership with St Mark's Australian International School. Our topic is the Australian University Admission Exams, which have arrived in Thailand. The ATAR is the Australian Tertiary Admissions Rank. It is how Australian universities select students for placement in their courses. It is a new approach to university admission for Thailand. So we're going to ask our guests more about what it means for the Thai and expat communities looking at higher education. We have 4 speakers today, and I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Ms. Karen Surmon, Trade and Investment Commissioner at Austrade Bangkok. Karen, welcome back to Thailand.
Thanks very much, Brendan. Great to see you and to a number of familiar faces or names on the audience side today. Greetings also to my fellow panelists. It's a pleasure to be here speaking with you all this morning. So Australia and Thailand, as many of us would know, have had a close relationship for many years. We've been important partners in trade, investment, education, defence, and in fact next year we will celebrate the 70th anniversary of diplomatic relations between Australia and Thailand. And where I work at Austrade, or the Australian Trade and Investment Commission, we provide services to help Australian exporters connect with Thai buyers and partners to attract productive foreign direct investment into Australia. But we also play an important role in promoting Australian international education in Thailand. And that's why I'm here today. And I thought I'd start today's session just by giving a quick overview of the growth of international education here in Thailand and the arrival of the first ATAR course available in this country. So in 1991, the Thai Education Act for the first time permitted Thai nationals to attend international schools here. And since then, the growth of international schools in Thailand has been quite phenomenal. That's because the Thai government and the Thai community have been very welcoming of international education. In the few years prior to COVID, we saw at least 3 new international schools open in Thailand each year. And at present, there are around 262 international schools established here, including nurseries and early childhood facilities that are also very popular. According to ISC Research, and that's a leading UK-based data and market intelligence company, student enrolments in international schools in Thailand have experienced 67% growth since 2011, just 10 years. Growth has predominantly been here in Bangkok and Greater Bangkok. And the demand on international school education in Thailand has further increased since the onset of COVID. This is because many Thai parents, really in response to the disruption, the border closures, the public health considerations, have made the decision to bring their children back home to Thailand and enrolled them in international schools here. So we've seen, continuous growth and then more recently an uptick in demand. Now, in terms of curriculum, most international schools in Thailand offer curriculums and certificates endorsed by non-governmental agencies. The British and American curriculums have been by far the most popular in Thai-based international schools, and they account for approximately 70% of all the curriculums offered. The International Baccalaureate, or IB, has also been very successful, and that holds about a 16% market share. Until now, an Australian government-endorsed high school certificate has not been an option for students in Thailand. But we're really pleased today to acknowledge that changes with the arrival of Thailand's first ATAR course, delivered in partnership with the Western Australian Government's Education Authority. And St Mark's International School has become the first in Thailand to offer an ATAR course, and that leads directly to university entrance in Australia and indeed into universities around the world. Given extended border closures, this new partnership has really arrived at the right time. Now there is an opportunity to let your children complete their high school certificate with an Australian qualification whilst remaining in Thailand. And that way they are prepared for direct entry into an Australian university, whether they choose to study online or wait until borders are open. So in closing, I'd like to congratulate St Mark's International School on this partnership and for being the first to bring the ATAR course and examination to Thailand.
Thanks, Karen. It's certainly exciting news and some interesting points you make there. I'll start with you. You mentioned the amazing growth in the international education scene since 1991. What has really driven that growth?
So I think the Thai government support since that change to the law in 1991 has attracted sustained investment into the international schools sector. And an important aspect of that has been their approval of a diverse range of national and international curriculum. So it's enabling institutions and bodies from around the world really to bring their programs to Thailand. The growing expat community has increasingly sought out international schools to facilitate a smooth transition for their children into higher education, perhaps when they move back to their home countries. And importantly, the growing Thai middle class has also been a real driver of this change. They're looking to give their children the best education opportunities. And this is particularly so for university-age teenagers who are looking to articulate into leading institutions in Australia and around the world.
Great. And you also mentioned about the amount of international students that have come back to Thailand. How do you think the sector will adapt post-COVID-19 when we can travel and live abroad freely again?
It's a good question, and it's something we're all looking to, I know. But I think regardless of how the situation plays out in the next 12 to 24 months, we should expect that there'll be an element of online learning that really becomes part of the long-term educational toolkit, if I can put it in that way. Technology, connectivity, increased engagement are all possible to a large extent through online learning, and it will continue to improve. And I think the advantage of this is that it affords a degree of flexibility for students and families, which we are becoming accustomed to. So it won't totally revert back to a pre-COVID world, I don't believe.
Great, thanks, Karen. And finally, Cambridge and IB are very popular in Thailand. How does the ATAR differ, and what's already out there?
Yeah, well, look, one point I didn't raise just previously, but relates to this question as well, is, the students and families have had to deal with frequent disruptions, in navigating their education over the last 18 months. And there's one very attractive aspect to the ATAR that differs from other programs. A student's ATAR score is made up of multiple points of assessment, which are assessed over the duration of the course. That's typically years 11 and 12, rather than it being contingent on the results of one final exam. And the great thing about this, of course, is for both the students and families, it really takes the pressure off from that final exam. And importantly, it enables remediation by teachers and family along the way. So students are getting real-time adjustments and support to make sure that they're achieving to their highest potential. I think, as well as I've said earlier, another advantage, of course, is that the ATAR facilitates direct admission into one of Australia's high quality universities. So there's a lot of real advantages. But I'm not the expert, Brendan, and we've got some speakers on hand. So I might let Roshan from the Government of Western Australia's SA explain that further. Thanks very much.
Excellent. Thanks, Karen, and good to see you back. I'll catch up with you again soon, of course.
Glad to be back in Thailand. Day 4 of quarantine, so we're nearly there.
So we now welcome Mr. Roshan Perera, Manager of the SCSA in the Western Australian Government for the international programs. Roshan, how are you?
Hi, Brendan. I'm well, thank you, and thanks for having me today.
Oh, it's our pleasure. I believe you're going to talk about the Australian approach to international education.
That's correct. I think I might just pick up from where Karen left off with respect to her comments on the structure of the curriculum. And I think it's very important to recognise that students, their learning journey should be the total sum of their enrolment in that particular program that they're studying at school, rather than being focused on just the outputs of one exam. And there are many factors that might actually impact student performance in an exam, which go beyond what the student can control. So one, I think, very important element in our program is that students the work that students do throughout the course of the program and the various assessments that they might do. And there are a range of different types of assessments, and all of these types of assessment recognize that students have different ways of learning, have different capabilities, and there's a range of not just knowledge but skills that we need to ensure students have the opportunity to be recognized in the final mark and in the calculation of the ranking that's required to get to university. So that is most definitely a feature of the program, and that's one that I think works very well in many countries around the world where the program is actually delivered.
Excellent. Thanks, Roshan. So is there a limit to how many schools around the world that you can partner with?
Okay, so that there isn't a limit per se, but for the School Curriculum and Standards Authority, there is definitely a focus on the quality of our partners. So for us, the engagement with schools is more than just sort of providing a curriculum system and then letting the school implement it by themselves. So there's a very sort of strong collaboration that exists between the schools overseas, such as St. Mark's and the SCSA. And that also reflects the way in which we work here in Australia. But at the foundation of that is ensuring that the school in itself has the elements that are needed for successful delivery of our curriculum. And so while there isn't a cap on the number of schools, we certainly look for certain attributes that give us a sense of how successfully the curriculum can be implemented. And why that's important is because ultimately it all is about the student outcomes and their learning experience. So if a school doesn't have the quality in teaching staff, the quality in facilities, and the understanding of different types of pedagogy, which are necessary for students to learn, a different range of skills and quite a lot of content across a number of courses, it becomes hard for us to have that sort of good partnership. So with St. Mark's, for example, in Thailand, they had to go through quite a rigorous process of quality assurance to demonstrate to us that the students coming into the Australian matriculation program would be given all the opportunities that they truly deserve to demonstrate their capabilities. So I suppose that is a fact for us in considering how many schools. It's less about the quantity and more about the quality of the partner school, which St. Mark's has demonstrated.
And Roshan, does the ATAR mean that students can only apply to Australian universities?
No, it doesn't. So there's been some research that has been done, and of a sample of universities right across the world, and these are universities of different levels of recognition internationally. So both in Australia, but in Europe and in the United States, there was an overwhelming acceptance of the ATAR, so the Australian Tertiary Admissions Rank, is recognised as a valid entry point into programs in other universities. And I think it's important to recognise that we most definitely want more students to come to Australia when travel restrictions permit, but the actual qualification that students receive, that certification that students receive, is internationally recognised, and it should offer students I think many different opportunities to pursue paths, wherever those paths may be, whether that's within Thailand, within Australia, or other places around the world.
Thanks. And can we clarify what you mean when we say it's streamlined? Is that because the university doesn't require additional admission requirements?
Yeah, look, I think that is that's precisely it. So with respect to that sort of word streamlined and what that means in terms of university admission, what we actually mean by that is that if a student goes through that journey of undertaking their schooling, doing their school-based assessment, combined with the examinations that we run, that total package in itself constitutes the necessary admission into university. And that's partly because it involves other elements as well, but which are incorporated into the program, such as literacy and numeracy testing, which goes over and above the examinations that we run. So from a university perspective, the actual certification, the ATAR in itself, is considered to be quite well-rounded and to reflect a range of student abilities. So rather than just purely academic, its design is aimed at recognizing all the various things that students might need to have a successful experience at university. So the need to then do something else like a standardized aptitude test or a general aptitude test is not there. And the robustness of the actual of the certification and that ATAR is accepted as being the valid entry for university.
Thanks, Roshan. We have a question from the audience from Andrew. I hope you don't mind. I'm going to chime in with this. Andrew asks, are Australians currently attending other international schools in Thailand able to take the ATAR exam?
The short answer is no. The ATAR exams can only be run at a school that's approved by the School Curriculum Standards Authority to offer it. So, so if they're not enrolled at St. Mark's, then unfortunately, no, they can't sit the ATAR examinations, I'm afraid. It's different to Cambridge A-levels, which is examination focused, because we are looking at the holistic journey of the student. So we're looking at not just the exams at the end of year 12, we're looking at whatever they've studied and whatever they've been assessed on in year 11 and year 12. So if they just come in for the examinations, that paints a very narrow picture of the student and their ability. And it's one that doesn't resonate well with our philosophy.
Okay, and final question, Roshan. Australia has very tightly closed borders at the moment, as we all certainly know here in Thailand. How do you see the future for international students in Australia?
Yes, look, you're right that the borders are closed at this point in time, and I believe Karen made a comment about this, which I completely agree with. That the world post-COVID, I think, will look very different. But I think it's important to recognise that there are various vaccination programs and policies in place in Australia to get those borders open as soon as is practical, and the situation around the border closures will eventually change. And I think it'll change sooner rather than later. So in terms of the opportunities for students, I think students starting the Australian matriculation program at this point in time are well placed for university entry here. Because when you think about the duration of the program, you're looking at 18 months at St. Mark's. And that puts the students on a good sort of a timeline to make choices, I believe, that align with policies around the anticipated policies around border openings and border closures. And I think also for those kids that aren't able to actually come to Australia, there are other opportunities for them. And I think that's something that Phil Payne from StudyPerth is probably well positioned to talk about. So even if the kids can't come there after finishing their AUSMAT, it doesn't mean that they fall into a hole of no options whatsoever. There are many other very high quality options for these kids, such that they can continue their studies without disruption. So yeah, maybe something that Phil Payne might be best positioned to speak about.
Thanks, Roshan. And Phil is standing by ready. We'd now like to welcome Mr. Phil Payne, the Chief Executive Officer of StudyPerth Australia. Phil, beautiful background you have there.
It's a beautiful city, Brendan. Very glad to be here, and hello to fellow panelists and everybody tuning in.
Excellent. So I believe you're going to run us through the advantages of the Australian pathway to higher education for both expats and Thais.
Yeah, I'd love to do that, but I'll just pick up on a couple of points that Roshan mentioned earlier. He kindly threw the ball to me, so I'll catch it.
Right.
There's a national plan. There's a national plan within Australia to open up the country, to ease restrictions. It's very much related to vaccination rates. So at 70% vaccination rate of eligible adults, we'll be able to allow a capped number of student visa holders subject to quarantine and availability into the country. So that's when things start to open up. And there's a very rigorous vaccination campaign ongoing at the moment. So we're hoping, as Roshan said, that this will be sooner rather than later. Most observers are predicting early in the new year we'll hit those targets and things will start to open up. So there is a very bright light at the end of a tunnel. There's a quarantine facility. I mean, many states and territories are looking at dedicated quarantine facilities. In Western Australia, one has recently been approved. That's expected to be online by March, which gives us greater capacity to take in arrivals. And StudyPerth itself has been working with the state government and federal government agencies on a plan to get international students back as soon as conditions permit. But as Roshan said, the option to start online and transfer onshore as soon as that's possible is an increasingly attractive option, because all the universities now provide excellent, high quality online learning and online support. So that's very much what we're encouraging at the moment. Having said that, we can't wait to welcome international students back into the country, and we hope it's sooner rather than later.
Great, and we're all looking forward to be able to travelling, and the education sector certainly needs it more than, or as much, if not more than ever. Looking further ahead, once a student earns their degree in Australia, is there a pathway to a career in Australia as well?
Yes, definitely. There are terrific opportunities for graduates of Australian universities. An Australian degree is obviously recognised worldwide. There's a visa program to work after graduation. There's a visa program to obtain residency for eligible students after graduation. So an Australian education really kind of opens the door to opportunities in Australia, back in Thailand, or around the world. In the last couple of years, Perth has been designated what's called a major regional city. And that means that graduates of WA universities are eligible for an extra year of post-study work rights, and also extra migration points, which will be of interest to any student who has an aspiration to move or spend time in Australia. I think I kind of skipped your first question though, Brendan, about the advantages or the value of higher education in Australia and WA. Can I switch back to that and just go through a few quick points?
Absolutely, please do.
Excellent. We like to talk about 6 E's as far as the value of an Australian education is concerned. So the first one of those is employment, and this is the ability of students to work while they're studying. Obviously, there are a lot of advantages to that. In Western Australia, as an example, all the jobs that were lost during COVID-19 kind of lockdowns and restrictions, they've all been recovered, all of them, and more created. So it's never been easier to obtain valuable employment during study, and that's very important to students. We assist with that at StudyPerth. We have a jobs board to connect students with opportunities, and also an initiative called Jobs Connect, which is run with the state government, where we map student job seekers with jobs in hospitality and tourism for them, and that's been extremely successful. The second E is employability, by which we mean the ability to get employment in a chosen discipline after graduation. And all WA universities and education providers have a very strong emphasis on work readiness. So that's a very key part of our offering. And we provide employability services for international students to help improve their job readiness for the job market. The third E is enterprise, for students who have an aspiration to start their own business. And a lot of research suggests that over 90% of international students have this aspiration. And I'm sure that Thai students coming from a very entrepreneurial kind of culture probably share in this kind of aspiration. And Western Australia and Australia are excellent platforms, if you like, to support students in that aspiration. And Perth is a recognised centre for entrepreneurship and innovation. The fourth of these is engagement. WA is one of the most diverse and the fastest growing states. So that kind of cultural diversity, if you like, makes for a very dynamic, welcoming and friendly society. There are over 80,000 Thais now living permanently in Australia. So our communities are very integrated, and Thai students coming to Australia will find a very welcoming, multicultural and integrated society and community. There's great support from universities for students, but also StudyPerth offers a student hub within the city centre, so students can meet fellow students, multicultural groups, community groups, employers, etc. at the student hub. We have an online employability platform for students to access even before they arrive in Perth. We provide free legal advice. We provide well-being and welfare services, and we have a range of absolutely wonderful student ambassadors and hub greeters to ensure that students' experience is a very valuable one and enjoyable. The fourth, I've lost count, I think fifth E is experience. So Perth, as you can see from the background, is a beautiful place. It's also safe. It's a very easy place to live, and the cost of living is it's very affordable, which we're famous for. It's an enviable climate, wonderful natural environment, and a great quality of life. We're also close proximity to most parts of Asia, and have the same time zone as large parts of Asia. And as you'll have noticed, 1 hour difference from Thailand, which is certainly an asset. And then the last of these is economy. Now, this is extremely important, we believe, for students considering their study options. Various research over the past months has identified WA as the strongest economy in the world. We have a consistently robust economy that's weathered global financial crises and weathered the pandemic very well. So a strong economy means jobs for students, both during study, but more importantly, perhaps after study within the community.
Thanks, Phil. And I'll throw another little plug into your fifth E experience. My 3 years in Perth, I remember being the fittest I'd ever been in my life. So it's certainly a healthy lifestyle there.
Certainly is.
And moving on to your sixth point about the economy, we are, of course, being optimistic, looking to post-COVID and expecting a big economic recovery. What skills do Australia lead the world in? And with that in mind, what courses and areas should prospective students be looking at?
Yeah, it's a good question. My advice to any student who asks me this is to choose a course that you love. Choose what you enjoy doing, and that's always a good starting point. But in terms of strengths of Australia, they include medicine, IT, agriculture, geology, cyber, and among them kind of modern, more future-looking disciplines, I would include cybersecurity. That's increasingly popular amongst international students, and we have real expertise in that in Australia. Games, art, and design, a really growing area, and again, we have great expertise. Biosecurity, clearly very important, an area, a discipline that's of growing importance, and allied health is an area we have real strengths in, and obviously that's an area of increasing demand. So degrees in these fields will have very good career paths in the near, medium, and presumably long-term future. All state and territory sponsored skilled migration into Australia is reliant on what's called skilled occupation demand lists. In Western Australia, we have 3 of these lists. The skilled migration occupation list 1, the occupation list 2, and the graduate occupation list. So 3 different lists of occupations that are in demand and will be sponsored. And between them, they offer 291 different occupations that are in demand. And they generally need a degree, and these include the occupations of accountant, electrical engineer, social worker, software engineer, and early childhood teacher. In addition, there are occupations on these lists that don't need a degree, but are in strong demand because the economy is going so well. And these include chef, electrician, and programmer, developer. So the purpose of the lists is to provide a pathway, as you're asking, to provisional and permanent visas for international students who choose Western Australia as their destination.
Excellent. Thanks, Phil, for those insights. And once again, seeing your background, I'm very much looking forward to getting back to Perth one day myself.
Look forward to it. I'll buy you a drink.
I appreciate that. We now move on to our final speaker, Mr. Michael Everingham from St Mark's Australian International School, Bangkok. Michael, first, congratulations on bringing ATAR into Thailand, and we look forward to, we'd like to hear some more insights into why St Mark's decided to go down that path and choose ATAR as a partner.
Yeah, thanks, Brendan, and thank you to all the member speakers today. We really appreciate your help in building an awareness for our St Mark's School in Thailand. So I'll just give you a brief history of our St Mark's School. Our founders, John and Liz, have both studied in Australia, both in Melbourne and Perth. And it was during this time that they'd become aware of the exceptional level of education being offered by Australian universities. John and Liz both have a passion for empowering students through education. They first opened St Mark's in 1999. They realised the great benefit of the ATAR system and chose to deliver the program by partnering with the Western Australian Education Authority. They are now the first international school in Thailand to be accepted into the Australian ATAR curriculum. Many other countries have also established a similar partnership, including schools in Singapore, Malaysia, China, and Japan. By completing the ATAR, our students are now eligible for admission into all universities in Australia. The ATAR program makes the admission process so much easier for students and parents.
Thanks, Michael. One thing that we do notice about St Mark's is your students win a lot of international medals. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. We do have a reputation for winning awards. Our students regularly compete on the world stage in academic Olympiads, especially in mathematics, the sciences, and languages. Our small teacher-to-student ratio ensures personalised tuition and allows us to maintain our high academic standards. Our core competencies are in maths and in the sciences. At the same time, our school values the importance of language studies. We do very well in enabling our students to communicate effectively in several important languages. Currently, we offer students Thai, Mandarin, English, and Japanese.
Excellent. Now, one thing that I found a little odd myself was the fact that there was nothing like ATAR before today. Is there any reasons for that?
I don't know any reasons in particular. We thought the same thing, that now that the ATAR is accepted by all Australian universities, we believed it was the right time to integrate the education system between our countries. Now, as you previously mentioned, the large Australian community that's living here in Thailand is continuing to grow, and the Thailand community in Australia is also increasing. And as was previously mentioned, our two countries share many similarities, especially in regards to agriculture, aquaculture, tourism, and IT. So linking our education system seemed to be an ideal way to share knowledge between our countries. And yeah, Phil mentioned about the employment opportunities in Australia, and Australia's always had a history of skill shortages and continues to welcome international professionals to live and work in Australia. Offering the ATAR accreditation will help open up pathways for the Thai families who wish to work and settle in Australia. The Australian education program that we offer will provide the opportunity for students to further their education and potentially work in Australia in the future.
Thanks, Michael. And how is the ATAR different to accreditation offered by other schools?
Yeah, that's right. Like most international schools in Thailand, St Mark offered an internationally recognised certificate of education. Now we use the ATAR program for year 11 and 12, while other international schools only offer the A-level, IB and AP program. All these are the year 12 qualifications, but the students still need to apply to the universities of their choice. With only a certificate of education, these students may still need to take additional entrance examinations, such as those for English, maths, and sciences. The application process is time-consuming with the outcomes uncertain. However, with the ATAR, as Roshan has previously mentioned, students do not need to take any more additional exams or English proficiency tests. The ATAR is the only accreditation required to enter universities. The duration of our ATAR program is 1.5 years, with the students finishing at the same time Australian students are completing their studies. Students receive their ATAR results in December, enabling them to start the university courses immediately in February. With other international schools in Thailand, students are required to study for 2 years to receive their certification, with the results released in August. Students will then need to apply for university admissions and start in February the following year. So as you can see, the ATAR enables students to save 1 year and start university a year earlier than the other Year 12 certificate programs being offered in Thailand.
Thanks. And I have just one more question, Mike. So my final question, Michael, is we see that the first group of students have already started their ATAR. So when are they due to finish and actually receive it?
Yeah, absolutely, Brendan. Yeah, our first students have embarked on the ATAR course. They've just started and they will sit their final exams in November of next year, 2022. And the good thing about this education system is that the assessments towards our ATAR is carried out across the full course. So the ATAR score is attained through periodic assessment tasks, routine testing, and then the final exam. I think Roshan mentioned this pathway before. So what we do, we suggest students plan their progression to the ATAR by researching the university courses they want, and then schedule routine meetings with our career advisors as early as Year 8. This way they'll know which subjects to study in secondary school and then work towards their chosen degree.
Excellent. Well, thank you again, Michael. We now have some questions for the audience. The two questions we have, I'll start with this one. It's a shorter one. When again is the ATAR exam and is it offered multiple times a year? Roshan, I think that might be for you, but anyone welcome to answer.
Sure. Thank you, Brendan. So the ATAR examination, as Michael alluded to, the written examinations I held from early November, and they're spread out over the course of 3 weeks because there are a number of different courses that students can pick from. So as far as possible, we try to provide a little bit of time in between those exams, and they're run at exactly the same time as the students here in Western Australia, or indeed in other schools around the world, sit those examinations. At this point in time, we have just the one examination period, but we've actually started to pilot a second set of examinations with one of our longer standing schools. Those exams will be offered in late March, early April. And providing that pilot goes well, we hope to offer that to all our schools.
All right, thanks, Roshan. And I have another question I believe is for you, but once again, all of the speakers are welcome to contribute. I'll start with a question. It's what is the benefit of doing ATAR over IB? And the explanation is, since there's a direct conversion from diploma IB results to Australian to ATAR, equivalent is already applied for diploma students. So what is the actual benefit? Does IB actually offer a wider choice of courses? Sure.
So I'm happy to try to make the first response to that question, and I welcome everyone else to do the same. And it's a very good question, actually. So I think first of all, I will say that I'm reluctant to say that one certification or one education system is inferior compared to the other. I don't believe that that's appropriate for me to sort of make that kind of comment. But I can talk about some of the differences that I'm aware of. And first and foremost, I think it's important to recognise that the ATAR and the curriculum system that sits under that is a product of a Government of Western Australia initiative. But the actual curriculum in itself is very much something that is informed by a great deal of consultation. And that consultation occurs right across the country with our like-for-like bodies in the other states and territories, and there is a great deal of dialogue that happens. But in the process of curriculum review or curriculum reform, we do consult quite heavily with the university sector. And what that basically means is then a student that is undertaking our curriculum, particularly the ATAR subjects, is undertaking a curriculum that has been informed by quite a lot of what the universities are looking for in terms of the sort of attributes and understanding that kids should be able to demonstrate by the time they get to university, which is why there is such a breadth of different types of assessment, but also courses. So there's a great diversity in the types of courses that students can enroll in. That is, of course, subject to the school's decision. So St. Mark's would have looked at its student cohort, thought about the sorts of pathways that students wanted to progress down, whether they wanted to go into the sciences or the humanities or business, whatever that might be, to then pick the range of courses that suits those student needs. So I think, in terms of the design of the curriculum, its breadth of offerings that are available to students, it's very nicely aligned to Australian universities. And I believe that's why universities around the world have recognised the ATAR, because it does have that breadth, it has that flexibility, and you're given a very broad kind of a perspective of the student. It's not just based on one point in time. And I think that the other thing as well, which is probably more from at a school level and what that partnership means with us, which has a direct impact on the quality of the student experience and their ability to get into university. There is a great deal of work and dialogue that we do in partnership with the school on very fundamental things. For example, what approach can I take to teach this aspect of that syllabus? How can I design that assessment so that I'm really kind of looking for a range of different abilities in these students? So all of these things are very school-specific type things, but they feed into the bigger picture of making sure that the students that go through the program are well prepared for their university studies. So I believe that is an advantage of our program, and based on my conversations with all the schools that we're working with overseas, and there's about 35 of them at the moment, that there is that rich kind of exchange of ideas and also teaching philosophy, assessment philosophy, which provides the kids, with, I think, a really good opportunity to get into the desired course that they have at an Australian university. Yeah.
Thanks, Roshan. And we have a question that I think will be for Michael at St. Mark's. So my daughter has just started year 12 in Bangkok. Would it be possible for her to enrol in the current ATAR class?
Yeah, certainly. Welcome to come across to St. Mark's. We're only 3 weeks in to the ATAR course, so it wouldn't be too much for that student to catch up, just with a bit of personalised tuition to catch up to the other students that are currently doing ATAR. So yes, welcome, come across.
Great, and I can of course provide that introduction if you would like there, Andrew. A very short question here. I'll ask this first. I won't need to take an ATAR exam if I complete my A-levels. Is that right?
So Brendan, I suppose if the question is from or about a student that's already studying for their A-levels and they want to see that through to then seek an Australian education experience, I believe the answer is no. Phil, you might be better placed to talk about admissions and what the universities might be looking for.
As you say, a student who is partway through their A-levels or coming towards the end of their A-levels is well advised to continue on that path. A-levels are well recognised by all universities. They are something that will be easily understood and recognised by universities, mapped across onto their admission standards. So yes, that would work. I mean, it's we obviously prefer the ATAR, we think it has particular advantages that Roshan has articulated very, very clearly. But I think the A levels are well recognised by Australian universities.
Excellent. Thanks, Phil. And the final question, we're almost out of time, from Jane. For Australian citizens educated in Thailand with IB or A levels, do students need to do English exams before being accepted into Australian universities? When the ATAR conversion is done, will additional activities, for example, Duke of Edinburgh Awards, Sporting Excellence Awards, life-saving qualifications, etc., will they be recognised?
So I might take first stab at this one, if that's okay. So look, I think with respect to university entry, when you're not using the ATAR, I would suggest that a person would be best advised to go to the admissions for those universities that they're interested in, and they can provide specific advice about what the university is looking for in terms of their admissions process. I know from our perspective with the ATAR, universities, not just in Australia, but right across the world, are looking at the broader sorts of things that a student has done that go beyond the academic. So for us with the ATAR, we have a range of non-examinable programs that we also offer and actually count towards their senior secondary certification. And they're there because we recognise that more and more universities are looking for a holistic student, a holistic candidate for their programs, as opposed to just focusing on kids that might demonstrate academically at very high levels, but may not have some of those softer skills. So I think, and so that's a feature of our program. But if you're wanting specific advice on admissions at particular universities, my suggestion would be to contact the university directly to understand what their admissions process would be.
Great, thank you, Roshan. And that's all the time we have for today, unfortunately. If you would like to connect with any of the speakers, please reach out to me. I'm happy to provide those introductions as well. So once again, thank you to our speakers, Karen, Roshan, Phil and Michael. A very informative session. We really appreciate it. And thank you to all of our attendees as well. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much.